This is Donnan and Dayne from UGAsports.com. And, Coach, glad to have you back here for another week. And we have some news to chat about with two new commitments to Georgia. We've got Micah Morris, a 6'4", 318 offensive tackle from Camden County, and Lavoisier Carroll, a 6'1", 190-pound athlete. He plays at IMG Academy, originally from Georgia. What did you see with these guys coming in? Because I heard you on UGA Sports Live a few weeks ago saying that one of Georgia's priorities had to be locking down the state during this time.
Yeah, I just felt like with the lack of visits, knowing that we weren't going to be able to get some of these out-of-state kids in here as much as we'd like, although we did get several in here for the weekend, before all this issue happened. I just felt like it was imperative that that was going to be a really big factor for the in-state players. For a kid to leave this state, he's got to really have a big reason to leave. And right now, with everybody staying, close to home, and the fact that a lot of your friends are going to school at Georgia, or whatever it might be, I just think it's a tremendous advantage. The early deals that Kirby pulled off, having these guys come to our camps, having them come to games as sophomores and juniors. And when you're hearing about a guy like, whoever it might be, but, they mentioned that they've been to Georgia 5 or 6 times. I mean, that's a pretty good advantage on anybody because everybody knows the way Kirby can it comes across sincere and all the different people that are recruiting. But I just think it's just a really good year in the state. And, I got the Pointer Sisters on over here right now. I'm so excited. I mean, seriously, it's just a very, very good time, we got to temper that enthusiasm, a little realism, though, with what's going on with our society. But, it's just a really good job by Kirby and Del McGee to finish out Carolyn. And it really makes me even more happy the fact that he had a choice between us and the Gators, and he finally came to his senses and dropped the Gators and came to us. So happy about that. And he's got world-class speed as a back. He's got elite speed. I know he can run away from you pretty quickly, and he's a big kid too. And then, of course, again, our offensive line just continues to be offensive line recruiting tremendous under Coach Luke, and just feel good about getting these guys in here. And hopefully we can, Micah is just a lot of people don't realize it, and they can maybe relate to the fact that Richard Seymour, who was a really good player for me and going up for the Hall of Fame in NFL this year, was only 17 years old when he played his first college game. I mean, he was, had just turned 17. So this kid's only 16, and he, if he keeps on growing, no telling how big he's going to be. But just listen to him talk on his commitment. He's a very mature sounding kid, and he's just a guy that probably would have come here a little bit earlier if there hadn't have been a change in the staff. But, he wanted to get to know Coach Luke, and he has. And I tell you, Matt's just doing a terrific job for us.
Where do you kind of project Morris being on the offensive line? I think most people view him as a tackle and probably a starting tackle here in the next couple of years.
Well, the good thing about him, he's a lot like, I wouldn't just say that he plays like Salyer, but he's got the ability to move inside if he needs to because he's got the feet. But I think it's just, who knows how big he's going to get. He just keeps on, like we said, with being only 16. But, we got Mims out there on the hook, and also the big tackle who's rated number 1 player in the state, and also Ferguson and the kid from Forsyth. So I think we can just get a clean sweep there on the O-line in the state. I mean, just off and running. We're in good shape with all 3 of those guys. So, but I can see Morris playing tackle or guard. He's just that good.
And that's Amarius Mims at Bleckley County High School in Cochran, Georgia, and then Terrence Ferguson, Peach County, which we know is just a factory of players for UGA and has been for quite a long time. That would be quite a haul for Matt Luke to jump in and own the state that way. How do you think he is doing really what he's doing? Because there's been no drop-off in recruiting, and Sam Pittman was doing it better than pretty much anyone's ever done.
Yeah, I just think the people need to realize that the University of Georgia, first and foremost, regardless who the head coach is, you got a good shot here in the state, and then you got a great, uh, tremendous recruiter, and it works at it like Coach Smart does. And then the advent of all these new facilities that we were sorely lacking, that are really making our program on a par with, and not giving a kid a reason not to care. I think that adds to the whole thing. But then you get a coach that has the background that Coach Luke has, coaching early on with Coach Cutcliffe at Duke and at certainly at Ole Miss, and then working up there at University of Tennessee under Coach Fulmer, who was an offensive lineman as a player and an O-line coach. He just got a tremendous background and fundamentals, and watching him coach during the bowl game prep, I had a chance to go over there several days, and old coach like me, I like to walk around and see the new guys, and I was just tremendously impressed because he's coming in on a situation there where he's got only 10 or 11 practices to really put the line together, and we'd had some dropouts there, Wilson and Thomas not playing, and then Ben Cleveland on top of that, and then Schaefer's out, so he had to really do a good job of not only learning our offense, but putting everything together there in a quick time. And I thought we did a great job in that game of maximizing our protection. And, Jake had a tremendous game. And I thought Coley called a good game, too. And, of course, it didn't hurt us the way Pickens played either. And, the other thing that was tough in that game is not having Swift and Cook, our top two backs, on the depth chart, and then all of a sudden we were calling on Zamir White, and he comes in there and plays terrifically. So a lot of things against the grain with Luke coming in there, but I thought he really did a terrific job with that.
There's a lot of things about Matt Luke that I think people don't see, and chief among them is just how much he's ingratiated himself into the culture of what UGA is and in Athens. When the baseball season was happening, a lot of people know that I'm also the public address announcer for UGA baseball at Foley Field, and there was one game, it was one of the evenings, I think a Friday night, and I just looked over into the booth beside me, and Matt Luke was just taking in the ball game and trying to kind of understand what was going on there. I didn't see him with a recruit or anything like that. It was just him checking out what's going on, and those things are important. Those things matter, especially when it comes to selling UGA to recruits, and he's obviously doing a good job of that.
Yeah, and I would point out this too, in his favor too, is the fact that he brings head coaching experience into the loop to help Kirby out. Not that he needs any, but it's always good to have somebody to lean on that's been through the same scenario with you, and a guy that's been in this conference too, that understands the league like he does and the nuances of different things that you encounter as a head coach. So that shows the kind of ability he has for them to make a change like they did with Coach Freeze being let go, and to elevate him as a head coach was really shows what kind of ability he has.
Let's move over to Lavoisier Carroll. Where do you see him kind of winding up on Georgia's depth chart position group? Where do you see him fitting in?
Well, here's the situation with Zamir White. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't got to see as much of him as we'd like with the two injuries he had. The first one, of course, we thought he would be okay, coming in, and because he had it in high school, but then he gets one in fall camp of his freshman year, so he has to sit out. And then he got his stuff back, particularly at the end of last year. But, being realistic, if he has any kind of year, you got to think he knows his shelf life with his two knees is probably, limited compared to some other guys, even though he's going to be great. I would say if he has the kind of year I'm expecting him to, he's going to be a guy that's probably going to go to the pros. And I don't want everybody to say, hey, Donnan says he's going. I'm just saying being realistic, more than likely. But, he could come back too. But so, we're going to have to supplement our area there. And I know everybody's talking about Edwards, the great back up in Michigan, who we're in on, and there's some good backs in the state. But I think for sure you get a guy like Carroll in here who's just a tremendous athlete, got blazing speed. I'm talking about he can show you his tail lights. Now, this guy, when you watch him on tape, he can run away from people. So he's going to fit in real well with the backs we have here, and will give us an instant guy to come in and hit the home run for us.
How do you view him in terms of kind of in Georgia's newer style of offense? Everyone thinks that Todd Monken will spread it out a little bit more. Is he a candidate one day to get the sweep out of the wide receiver spot coming through the backfield, get on the edge, or is he more of a downhill runner, do you think?
Yeah, I think he could be, he's just a bigger guy than Cook, but same kind of speed, quickness. But, I don't really know what our situation is going to be because I hadn't had a chance to watch our guys practice. But when you can play at the level he's played and be as effective and be rated a 4-star running back out of IMG down there in Bradenton, Florida, it just kind of shows you what his ability is. So I'm sure he's going to fit in. And as usual, Coach McGee continues to just be the top running back coach in America, not only on the field, but recruiting wise too. And, these kids realize he's going to get you ready for the league. So they're all looking if they got a shot to come to Georgia, they're going to look at it hard.
And one thing you mentioned is that he not only commits to Georgia, but that took him away from Florida. You're a coach. You guys are competitive. Just how good does that feel when you make a flip like that?
Well, certainly it kind of rubs a little salt in the wound because that's your big rival. But at the same time, it could go the other way anytime too. We lose players, and you just got to be ready. These kids nowadays, I mean, they can change their mind, and a lot of them commit early and then realize that they might have made a mistake. And fortunately, the ones that do usually turn out being the right decision for the second time. But I think it's just a case of I don't really think Kirby gets up and does jumping jacks over it. Maybe like I would think that the Florida staff would be if they got one from us, because I don't know that that's happened too much lately.
One thing that I thought, though, is with Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, soon to be DeAndre Swift, there are so many recent Georgia running backs that have made it to the pros, many of whom benefited from Kirby Smart being the head coach at Georgia. The position group of running back seems like it turns over so quickly, and I think some of that is just because there's talented players there, and like you say, they'll get more opportunities. When it comes to the roster management of trying to project who are we going to have for this particular year, it seems like that happens quicker and quicker in my eyes. Does it feel that way for you?
Absolutely, and I mean, it's a new way of life. We got guys coming out early like Swift did. You got guys getting hurt like White did. You got guys that, end up staying an extra year that you might have thought they were coming out like Michelle and Chubb did. So you got to balance that out. And what people need to realize is if a kid wants to come in January, you've got to have a scholarship that's open and you're 85 for that. Now, most of your projections are for the guys that leave in the summer, graduate in May. And so you got to balance all that out. We had 6 guys in here last year, this last spring starting out that were early enrollees. And I think last year we had like 14. So, I mean, it's just goes back and forth. But roster management is a new deal in coaching now. You got to be really adept at figuring out, and you add the transfer portal, and you add the academic issues and the injury issues. It's just a tough deal.
Well, and I remember a day when Georgia had Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall, Nick Chubb, and Sony Michel, and Brendan Douglas still got to start because of injuries, and I think maybe a suspension in there too. So in my opinion, you cannot have enough talented running backs.
Yeah, I think that's true in pretty much every position. We had 37 players last year play at least 100 snaps on defense and the kicking game. So that's another area that Kirby uses to help recruit. I mean, he shows a picture to these kids. These are all the guys that played this year, and look at how many of them were freshmen. And it's just not, a bunch of BS. It's the truth. And when you're a freshman kid and you're looking at playing in a major program that's a top 5 year in and year out program like we've been the last 3 years, you might have a little hesitancy because of that, but then you see that these kids are actually on the field. So any doubt you might have on that line, hey, this guy will play me if I'm good enough, so I'm not worried about that.
One thing I remember you and Roddy and Jake saying earlier this year on UGA Sports Live is that when Brock Vandergriff committed for the 2021 class, that kind of changes how people view it, and kind of he's just a leader in the sense of he is such a highly rated quarterback, and he's right down the road from Athens, and so there's just relationships that can be built through that. Are we seeing kind of the fruits of that now with more of these Georgia guys committing?
Yeah, I think so. Just the fact that every kid that plays ball, whether you're little league or on up, you know that the guy that gets a lot of attention is, and if you don't have one, you're not very good. So the fact that we got a guy like Brock coming in here shows everybody that the future looks good. The receivers see that, backs see that, offensive linemen see that, and defensive players see that because they know you got to score points to win. So he's the other thing that's a benefit is he's been to all these camps. He's met these kids. He's a very outgoing guy, has good leadership skills. So he knows that when I'm sure they got him texting and talking to these players. They got a good relationship already. So you got to build around that. And I'm glad we got Brock coming in here.
I think the other thing it shows is that these coaches are making the most of the opportunities to recruit while people are quarantined at home. And I know a lot was built into their relationships before you get to this point, to the commitment announcements. But Georgia coaches seem like they're not slowing down whatsoever. That's got to say a lot about Kirby Smart's leadership, about how the staff is being handled right now, don't you think?
So how old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay. That's not ever going to happen in your lifetime that Kirby Smart ever slows down. I don't care what's going on. So, hey, I mean, you're exactly right. They're going to find a way. They're going to do whatever's necessary, use the resources that are out there. You know, I saw a little clip that they had Collier Perno doing a little Twitter announcement about our nutrition. They're sending out things on academics all the time. I mean, you got to realize that you got to be flexible, and you just can't throw up your hands and say, look, what are we going to do about recruiting? I know right off the bat, Kirby was talking to different people about what their plans were going to be. What if we don't have spring practice? What if we don't have summer recruiting, spring recruiting, all that? You know, he was already on top of that the first day. Because you got to think ahead. That's part of your job as a coach, is to look into the future.
One of the other things that coaches are able to do with a little bit more time now is just to break down lots of film. And I heard Kirby Smart say in his teleconference last week that they've been able to join different coaching staffs around the country via Zoom just to chat some different concepts. And one that we've seen emerge really in the last decade, but very hyper-focused, and I'd say the last 5 or 6 years, is the run-pass option, the RPO game. And we kind of expect more of that to come with Todd Monken based on his track record. Where did you first see run-pass option? When did that develop?
You know, there's a lot of people that take credit for it, and a lot of people that say they did it and all that. But, you know, really, I think the team that really started it, of course, Coach Rodriguez did a form of it back in the 90s up there in West Virginia with that small school. But the team that really started having a lot of success, in my opinion, is Baylor under Art Briles, because they not only were throwing the underneath stuff, but they were throwing the ball deep, and they were taking maximum splits with their wide receivers. And for the fans on there, just to tell you, used to be when a guy would split out really close to the sideline and the ball was on the other hash. As a defensive coach, you're probably thinking, hey, there's no chance they're going to throw the ball to this guy. They're trying to widen us out so that they can run the ball. But they would take those maximum splits and still throw the ball to the guy down the field, and with tremendous success. But, some people have asked on our board to go over the RPO and what to do about it. And so basically – what you do is, back in the old days, when you ran a play action pass, you may run off a run where it looked like you were running the ball, but your linemen were pass protecting. Well, it had a little bit of an influence maybe on the linebackers, but not the secondary, because they could read the guard and the tackle and their sets by that. Instead of coming off the ball, they were setting back to pass protect. So, play action was good, but not near as good as when it was a run fake. So, a run block. So we started a lot of teams in the early 2000s late 90s we're running what we call Rambo Protection, where you actually block the run and then you threw a pass off of it to make the defense think you're running the ball. But we didn't have the advantage of going on and running the running play. We just called the pass protection, which was Rambo, and we threw the ball. Now, the RPO means run pass option. That means you're going to call a run at the line in the huddle, or if it's no huddle, you'll bark it out, and your line's going to block that run. So it looks like a run to everybody. And if the quarterback sees the box or the area where you're going that looks like it's susceptible to being able to run the ball and you're not outnumbered, then it's going to stay a run. You're going to go on and run the ball. But if for some reason it doesn't look good, your linemen still are blocking the run, but the quarterback has the ability to fake to the back or just pull it right away and throw a pass to a certain receiver. It might be the outside guy, might be the inside guy, might be the slot, the wide. But they add onto these runs what they call tags. So let's just say we were running the inside zone. You might call it Ohio, or you might call it 34, whatever it might be. And then you tag something on the outside like a double slant or, whatever it might be. So you go to the line of scrimmage and it looks like you can't run the inside zone. So the line blocks the run, but both of the outside receivers on the tight inside run a double slant. And because the box is loaded, you can throw the ball over the linebacker who's rushed in there, or in the gap there to the wide receiver, or to the outside guy if he beats the strong safety in there. So that's one of the most prevalent one. Or the other one would be just a short side of the field, just throwing a hitch route to the number one receiver who, let's say you're running something to the weak side and they got an overload there, and you just pull up and throw the short hitch route over there. So that's a pretty good, to me, breakdown of it. And then defensively, what you're seeing now is all the defenses have to really set their defense up in their philosophy based on the run pass option, because if you can't stop that, whatever you got called, not going to be very good. So used to be, hey, if they do this, we're going to do that. So when you first start your defensive planning, you say, what if they run the RPO here? Then this is what we're going to do. And to me, that's why you're seeing a lot more split safety defenses. You're seeing more of the free safety over the top and the strong safety and a buzz technique over the slot, where he can still play those underneath routes and you still get zone pressures. Or you play quarters coverage where half the field is playing too deep and the other half is playing some kind of matchup area. So that's how defensive has evolved, and the offense. That's a long summation there, but that's pretty much the way it's all come about.
There's a lot of information for a quarterback to process there, both pre-snap and then what they're reading once they get the football, and then that all happens in a very short amount of time. How would you coach a quarterback to kind of go through that progression to make the correct decision on an RPO?
Well, the one thing that helps the quarterback is you're going to the line with the idea is you don't have to check a play off, so that helps you. You used to be, if you had a play that didn't look good, then you had to go to something else. In this kind of situation, the first thing you say is estimate the defensive intent. What can they do from how they're lined up? And the percentage here is I can still run the ball, so I don't have to worry about pulling it. But if there's any doubt, you got the easy throw, you're going to take it. So what I always used to tell them is, those defensive people, they like to disguise and do all that stuff, and they do a pretty good job of it during the week in practice. But when they get in the Sanford Stadium and there's 95,000 people out there, and they start getting a little tight, they don't do quite as good a job of of trying to disguise things, and they're really more anxious to just execute. So usually speaking, the way somebody looks is what they're going to do, the defensive intent. So coaching a quarterback would be, look, this is the way they look. They're in a one high safety. They got a really good shot of running this stunt. Their alignment of their front looks like it. Their secondary is lined up. So more than likely, you're going to take the tag that we used. And, the tag sometimes could be something else. It might be a different, like in the bowl game, we were throwing a lot of fades and back shoulders to George off of the run pass option. And what you're always looking there is, somebody was asking me too once, I'm going to hit that while we're at it. It's what makes the difference on why you throw a back shoulder or why you throw the ball to the fade. And really, the hips of the receiver and the hips of the defensive back tell me that. If those hips are close together after about 12 or 14 yards, there's more than likely you're not going to beat that guy deep. So you go ahead and throw the ball to the back shoulder. But if your hips are way ahead of him or a step or two ahead of him, let it go and throw the fade. So that's what you can look for on the difference between those two throws.
The one wrinkle that we saw kind of perfected, I guess, with the RPO in 2019, and it's fresh on my mind with LSU because they had a legendarily accurate quarterback performance along with the receivers who did not drop the ball. But one thing that you have said that they did so well was that they did not substitute and therefore did not allow the defense to substitute. What effect did that have, and why did that work so well?
Well, the defense couldn't get to their nickel and dime package if they were running regular down and distance on the first play, and then they get another first down and they can't substitute and they're eating you up. So we got pretty good at it later in the year or this year of running the package where we get the guys in and out. But the biggest thing is you're going to just have to, whatever you're going to go with on defense, you're going to have to stay with it in your groupings against LSU because they're not going to let you substitute much. LSU was tremendous at running the backside glance, what we call a glance route, where instead of throwing that double slant strong, they would throw about an 8-yard glance route to the backside receiver off of if the backside linebacker was filling in there, and they just throw it in between the defensive end and the corner there. They just hit an inordinate amount of those, and Joe was terrific at throwing that, just hitting that, and they did a good job of throwing the ball to number 2 in the slot too. They really did a good job of throwing behind those linebackers.
What do you tell receivers with RPOs in terms of blocking and then route running? Because obviously those are two different assignments, and what should be top of their mind in an RPO situation?
Well, if you got a run play call, you're going to block the run. But if you got an RPO, you don't know that the quarterback's going to hand the ball off, so you got to run the route. But a lot of times, running the route's just as good as the block because you're taking the guy and he's covering you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if they're playing man coverage, a lot of times we would just use a runoff technique back in the old days where, hey, you just clear the guy out. You don't have to block him. Just do something. He's got you man to man. He's got to cover you. He's not worried about run support out there. So what we would do in an RPO now is if you got a tag with it, you're going to run that tag and then adjust if you see the run, then try to find the ball and go get your hat in front of what we call the MDM, most dangerous man, and try to get in front of the guy and just shield him.
Well, there's so many different little wrinkles and elements. Like if you had a tight end that had one primary block, but then he releases to open. I mean, there's just so many things that you could be creative with as an offensive coordinator. I have to think that the time that coaches have right now, where they're kind of being able to slow down and maybe do more play design, you have to think that whenever football happens again, there's going to be some creative things that come from this time period.
No question. I think in our case, maybe not as much because our kids are going to have to learn the base philosophy and the base stuff that Coach Monken's putting in, without the benefit of any practice, but a lot of meeting time. But usually speaking, though, you got to have some meat and potatoes, Dane. You got stuff that you believe in and that you really understand, and you're going to make it work, and then you're going to add a few things. But the one thing that is available here is a lot more time to study other teams, study pro teams, and read up and be a master at your craft. As much as I want, as a coach, as much as I want 5-star players, I want 5-star assistant coaches that's striving to be the best assistant coach at your position in the SEC. So the way you do that is watch others, study others, ask questions, and you got plenty of time to do that, more so maybe now than you ever do.
It's an exciting off season, and I know that there's a lot of peril that goes along with it too. But just kind of seeing how coaches adapt to it and the leadership that comes from it, I've been impressed with that. We do want to end up with our segment, Story Time with Coach D, and this is where I simply say a name from a player that you coached or had some interaction with, and you give me a story on them. And this week, tight end Randy McMichael.
Randy McMichael, one of my favorite players here at Georgia, probably the least recruited guy as far as stars and things that we signed, but turned out to be not only a good player, just a terrific player for Georgia, and had a tremendous pro career. I mean, just an outstanding athlete, first of all. And it all started out in a year where we were coming off a losing season and not having a really great recruiting class, but we were looking for players, and I was recruiting Reagan Torbert down there in Peach County, where Ferguson is now. I think that's where he is, Ferguson, offensive lineman. And
Peach County.
And so we got. I went down there to watch Reagan play, work out a little bit, and Randy was over there playing basketball, and I asked the coach, I said, "Who is that kid?" And he said, "It's Randy McMichael." I said, "Did he play football?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Let me watch some tape." So I watched a little bit on it, and I said, we got to check this guy out. So we got him in, ended up taking him. And unfortunately, his first year and a half, he just had the worst luck. He broke his thumb, and then he also had a bad knee injury, and really didn't start really getting on the roster that much until 99. We had some good running tight ends then, and the fact we had Larry Brown and Javaris Johnson and the kid from up in Jermaine Wiggins from up in came with me from Marshall, and then we ended up getting Randy in here, and boy, he just 99. He just started really rolling, and 99 was all conference, 99 and 2000. Then he had a big year for Coach Rick, 2001. So just a really good player, and the story that I will always remember about, two stories about Randy, beside him being a terrific player and doing all that. The first one was we were having trouble against Vanderbilt in 99, I think it was. And we were, I got the offense over on the side and said, "Hey, we got to get going here." And I said, we're flip-flopping around. Our defense is playing good. We're just stopping ourselves, and we need a break. And by that time, my back was to the field, and they were looking at the field and, listening to me. But Randy said, "Hey, you don't have to worry about it." He said, "Their coach just faked the punt, Coach. We got the ball inside the 15. So it was pretty, and I hated that, now that Coach Woodenhofer just recently passed away, and I started thinking about that story. Woody was a tremendous coach in the pros and did some really good things on defense at Vanderbilt. They just never could get their offense going. And then the other one was, everybody knows about the Jasper Sanks fumble that never was, but we could have kicked a field goal sooner, which, every day of my life I wish we would have, but we didn't. But anyhow, we're playing down in Tampa, and, we had the game where we were just playing terrible in the first half, and then came back, and game goes to overtime. And we talked about on last week's show that Josh Millard goes in there and sacks Breeze, and they try a field goal and then miss it. So it's our opportunity. All we need is a field goal. So the first play we run is I'll never will forget it, is Y return to dot left open, 49 toss. And we ran the toss sweep to Patrick pass, and he goes to down to about the 6, maybe 5 yard line. and for some reason there was a timeout or something was messed up there, and we were over on the sideline, and Randy came up to me, and excuse my language here for anybody there, but he comes running up and said, "Kick that son of a bitch right now, coach." And anyhow, we, because we hadn't kicked it against Georgia Tech, we ended up going on and kicking it right away on the first play after that. So Randy was pretty smart in trying to get us going and do it. We didn't want to take a chance on any fumbles.
I've known you for about a year, Coach, and one thing I know for sure is you like seeing your football players play basketball too. And so it doesn't surprise me that's where he first caught your attention.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, guys that can run and jump got a good chance. Guys that can do the job in the discus and stuff like that as linemen and track too. But I think we might have run a little quarterback sneak maybe to move the ball in the middle, but that was it. But and Randy now a very personable guy, working over there in Atlanta has a radio show during the week and does a great job. And kind of a irony is he was with the Dolphins there, and when Kirby went down there for with Coach Saban, and I think Derek Dooley was his position coach. But anyhow, glad to talk about Randy.
He's a great player, and I think a lot of people remember him from his plays with you, but then also just him being unstoppable in the hobnail boot game on that final drive to put Georgia in position to beat Tennessee.
Oh yeah, it was great in that game, and then Haynes catches the ball. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that we got Haynes in here when we had some really good backs. Patrick Pass and Edwards and all those guys in here. And we got him in from Western Kentucky as a walk-on, and he earned a scholarship. Ended up playing for the Steelers, but you had him one year. You had him and Alandis Gary both waiting in the wings. With those other guys. It's just had some really good backs there that did a good job for us.
And now Veron's got a son that will be highly recruited here. Well, he already is highly recruited, but he's a rising high school sophomore. He's going to be a really good running back one day. And we're going to chat with him on a Dog Days podcast at some point.
Yeah,
maybe he'll wind up being our story time with Coach D one day, too.
Yeah, I like Veron to see what's going on. I used to kid Veron one time about I think that – I can't remember when it was, but I used to kid Veron about, hey, you just keep on working, man. You're going to get a scholarship and things are going to work out. And, man, I tell you, he did a terrific job for me. And then the next year with Coach Rick, I mean, he was awesome.
Yeah, George had a lot of great players that worked that hard. Well, that's it for Donnan and Dayne this week, Coach. We hit a lot with recruiting, with RPO, with Randy McMichael. I think it's a pretty good show. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think football-wise, I hope I was succinct enough to explain that. When you're an old coach like me in the fourth quarter, you like to talk about ball because you don't get to do that much. And I hope that I know the fans like different stories and all, but we're trying to bring out a few things about today's football that maybe helps them understand it a little better. So put up with me on that.
And if you've got a technical football question for Coach Donnan or a storytime person that you want to hear about, hit me up on Twitter at Dayne Young. That's DayneYoung. And we'll keep taking those suggestions as we do the Donnan and Dayne podcast. Thanks as always, Coach.
Thank you.